everyone, I'm Deborah Bannon. I know we've met in a brief orientation video, but I wanted to do a quick covering of the DSM. I talked to a few of you about this in our conference call today. What I'm going to do is very quickly kind of go over the DSM overarching. I'm going to look at the different groups and kind of just talk about them briefly. I really don't expect this to be any more than 20 minutes. I'm kind of hoping it'll be to the point. And then what we'll do is, if we have some time, we'll briefly discuss treatment plans and how those are informed. So again, DSM, you guys know this. One of the things you guys, I'd like you to be thinking about as you're studying psychopathology, and I'm sure you've already touched on this in some other courses, but just labels, how we use them. Can they be dehumanizing? Can they become excuses? How can we use the labels and the diagnoses that we give our clients in a way that maximizes the good that they can do and decreases and minimizes the bad that they can do? Okay, so we all know the DSM is built upon the biopsychosocial approach, which means we take into component the biological aspects, the psychological aspects, and the social aspects of a person as we're diagnosing them. We do not just look at them as a broken individual. What we look at is all these different pieces that make up an individual and that inform our diagnoses. Okay, so the first group is anxiety. This is all from the DSM. I have some little videos for you guys to watch, but I don't know if I'll cut and paste links. Maybe if you guys email me, I will. But otherwise, you can find little videos. I think it's important, if you're not familiar with some of these things, to watch little experiences to give you a better understanding of them. So anxiety, this is from the DSM again. Anxiety disorders include disorders that share features of excessive fear and anxiety and related behavioral disturbances. Fear is the emotional response to real or perceived imminent threat, whereas anxiety is anticipation of future threat. The anxiety disorders differ from one another in the types of objects or situations that induce fear, anxiety, or avoidance behavior, and the associated cognitive ideation. So this right there is the DSM telling you, okay, how are we defining fear? How are we defining anxiety? And what they do is they say, well, this is why we have grouped all of these disorders together, because they fall under that umbrella of fear and anxiety. And then they differ based on the avoided behavior, the associated cognitive ideation, but that's why they're all grouped together. And I think when you understand the grouping, it makes a lot more sense while they're all together and help you remember them more. So I'm not going to go over all these because you guys are reading these, but a couple that fall under this one, right? Separation anxiety disorder, agoraphobia, panic disorder. And we can see that a lot of these, they have, right, it has that vein of anxiety through it, right? If not just founded on anxiety altogether. So we can see how they're woven together in this family. The next one is OCD and related. So we have obsessive compulsive, trichotillomania, hoarding. So all of these, right, are behaviors that encourage an individual to do repetitively for some sense of relief. And the reason that OCD is put next to the anxiety family in the DSM is for this reason, because it has things in common with doing something in order to then relieve a symptom or relieve an anxiety or relieve a belief. So how the DSM is built is very purposeful. Not only each family, but even how the families, how they're put next to each other, is to represent that they are close to each other and they have some associations. Right? So just looking at every single thing as dependent and detached, like the anxiety disorders are very different from OCD, it doesn't work that way, right? There really is a little bit of bleed and overlap. We need to delineate more to speak in a meaningful manner in order to give a diagnosis, in order to convey a lot of information in just a short amount of time. But it's recognized that there's a lot of interweaving in symptoms and root causes and such. Depressive disorders. DSM says presence of sad, empty, or irritable mood accompanied by somatic and cognitive changes that significantly affect the individual's capacity to function. What differs among them are issues of duration, timing, like when do they happen, and presumed etiology, right? So that again tells you what they look at these things as connected, but those are the differences, right? Duration, timing, and presumed etiology. Because again, recognizing we don't really know a lot. And again, this is put next to OCD and related disorders on purpose as well. Pay attention to where things fall next to each other in the DSM. Trauma and stressor-related disorders. The DSM says disorders in which exposure to a traumatic or stressful event is listed explicitly as a diagnostic criterion. So it needs to be explicit, right? Not just, oh yeah, and this thing also happened, but no, this is part of. Close relationship between these diagnoses and disorders in the surrounding chapters on anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive and related disorders, and dissociative disorders, right? So here the DSM is even pointing out, hey, the chapters that it's next to, there's a close relationship. So we've got a reactive attachment disorder, disinhibited social engagement disorder, of course the famous one that everybody talks about whenever they think of trauma, PTSD. And these are some videos of RAD, reactive attachment disorder, an episode of that. Very important to see, and especially important to see how in a child, it is not just a fit. This is not just a child throwing a fit. This is a different beast. It is a different thing that is being witnessed. Bipolar and related disorders, bridge between the two diagnostic classes of schizophrenia spectrum and depressive disorders, because again, right, we looked at depressive, right, and then we got trauma, and then we have schizophrenia that's going to be coming, and depressive disorder. So again, they're also talking about bipolar is seen as between these two families, between these two classes of schizophrenia and depressive. And again, that can kind of help you get a picture and more of an insight into bipolar. Just knowing that right there, right, that is seen as a bridge between the schizophrenia spectrum and the depression spectrum. You got bipolar 1, 2, cyclothymic, another thing to follow in the bipolar. So then schizophrenia, DSM says, defined by abnormalities in one or more of the following 5 domains: delusions, hallucinations, disorganized thinking, speech, grossly disorganized or abnormal motor behavior, including catatonia, not moving, and negative symptoms, the lack of something. So again, delusions are in how we think. Hallucinations are in what we see. So that's the difference between those two. And then here you got schizotypal, schizophrenia, schizophreniform, and the different disorders that fall in that. Again, keeping in mind that schizo comes from the Greek meaning tear. Schizophrenia, there's a tear in the mind. There's some interesting research. I won't go into it too much. We don't have time right now. But there's a part of the brain called the cingula insula. And the cingula insula in most healthy people is wrinkled and nice and wrinkled, and that's good. And people who have schizophrenia, the cingula insula is smooth. And so one of the things they believe that leads to is that the differentiation of understanding what happens in your brain and what you think, and understanding what happens outside in the real world. So for example, right now, everybody think of an animal that is a crazy color, a color that animal is not normal. Think of that. One that you've not seen, an animal that you've never seen be that color. Now think of it. Now it tells you, hey Bob, let's go have pizza. Okay. Now we all know that we just imagined that. None of us is thinking that actually we ran into a creature like that who said, hey, Bob, let's go have pizza. None of us actually believe that happened in real life. We all know that it happened just in our brains. But what if you could no longer distinguish between what was happening in your brain and what was happening in the real world, right? And so a smoother cingula insula helps that difference is not so clear. So they're actually able to diagnose often. It's not. I don't think it's at 100% now, but it's pretty good. With CT scans, they can confirm. They can do physiological confirmations of schizophrenia. Okie dokie. Personality disorders. Personality disorders, I'm sure you guys already know this. I hope you guys already know this. Are typically not diagnosed until a client is 18. And the reason for this is because it's really seen as personality disorders do not get treated. They do not go away. They can get treated to be in remediation or to be coped with or for people to develop better skills for. But personality disorders are typically seen as not going away. So we don't want to, in almost every instance, we don't want to diagnose somebody with a personality disorder before they're 18. I've never had to diagnose somebody with a personality disorder before they're 18. I can usually find another diagnosis that'll work. Because again, it's seen as something that never leaves them. So if it gets on their chart, it can stick with them forever. So the 3 clusters are the eccentric and odd behavior patterns of paranoid, schizoid, and schizotypal personality disorder. Cluster B is really dramatic, right? Very, very over-the-top behaviors. Antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic. And of course, antisocial commonly associated with the prisons, because a lot of inmates they have antisocial personality disorder because usually there's a loss of empathy and such. They're certainly not all inmates have that. That's a common misconception. Just because you're a criminal, just because you're an inmate, just because you're convicted does not, by any stretch of the imagination, mean you have antisocial personality disorder. But if you're looking for a population that would be very high in antisocial personality disorder, it would be a prison. Cluster C, very anxious and fearful behavior patterns would be avoidant, dependent, and obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So again, we want to be more careful with personality disorders because once we get that diagnosis, that can stay with them for the rest of their life. Even if somebody else wants to get it off their chart, it was a past diagnosis and it's seen as a diagnosis that doesn't leave. So it could still linger for a long time. Okay, so these are some diagnoses of treatments. I'm hoping that you guys have either seen them or you will watch them in your theories class. If you do not watch them, I highly encourage you to do them. Honestly, if you haven't watched them, I would say go ahead and watch them now. You can find them on YouTube. They were filmed in the 60s or the 70s. The client's name is Gloria. She agreed to have a real session filmed, and the people that were her counselors were three men who actually started some of the biggest schools of thought, the biggest theories that we currently use. So one of them was Rogers, right, person-centered or Rogerian therapy, and they have Pearls for Gestalt, and then you have Ellis for RAT, right, rational motive therapy. So you can actually find these on YouTube. Like I said, if you just type in Gloria and Rogers, or Gloria and Ellis, or Gloria receiving therapy from Rogers, or something like that, you should be able to find them in YouTube. They're very, very valuable. Even if you don't watch the whole thing, they're very valuable. Not only is it very valuable to be able to watch an actual real client experience, we don't get that option very often because of confidentiality and other things, but you also get to see the people who actually came up with the theories administering the work, doing the work. So if you haven't seen these already, I highly encourage you to watch them. And I just wanted to spend a second talking about to you guys about treatment plans, because your theoretical orientation will have a profound impact upon the treatment plan that you come up with for your client. We've been talking about this week as you've been working through the client maps, and when you get to that treatment plan, I know a lot of you said, I don't really know what I should do here. And part of it is we want you to wrestle with that. We also do want you to find resources and look at those resources and consult that, and also talk with each other and get ideas. This is also, treatment planning is a wonderful, wonderful way to use supervision as well. But absolutely encourage you, when you're new in the field, I know it's not fun to get more supervision than you need sometimes, but absolutely when you're starting to work on treatment plans, I would encourage you to get a supervisor with you, and that way you can make sure that your treatment plans from the get-go are as strong as you could possibly make them. One of the things that will one of the biggest drivers of your treatment plan will be your theoretical orientation. So if you don't already know your theoretical orientation, and you don't already know which one it is, maybe you haven't taken your theories class yet, I would encourage you to start looking at it anyway, because it is important to know. Some of you are going to come up with ideas for your treatment plan that totally are in line with the person-centered approach. But if somebody else over here is psychodynamic, well, they might not really align very well. And it's important to know where you're coming from, how you believe clients are broken, how you believe that they're fixed, right? What you believe is the best way to connect with them, what you believe is the best way to help them change or grow, or whatever words you would put in there. Those are all a piece of your your theoretical orientation. So if you haven't had your theories class and you haven't even started down that road, start thinking about it. Start maybe reading articles or just kind of looking up videos. This could be super great to give you an idea, an indicator of which one kind of jives more with how you think about the world. For those of you who have already taken theories and you do already have an idea of what your theoretical orientation is, apply it. And one thing I will say is I don't want to hear eccentric. Eclectic. I don't hear anybody say that they're eclectic. In my experience, I have hired and fired people now, and when people say they're eclectic, what they really just mean is that they're too lazy to really know a lot about one or two theoretical orientations. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do from now on your client map, when you're in the treatment section part, the treatment plan, in it, the top line needs to say what your theoretical orientation that your treatment plan is being built from. So if your treatment plan is being built from Rogerian, or person-centered, say that. If your treatment plan is being built from cognitive behavioral, say cognitive behavioral. Whatever your theoretical orientation that you're basing that treatment plan from, you need to write at the top of that. And again, you cannot say eclectic. You need to pick one. You can maybe pick two. They have to work together, though. there are theories that do not work together. So if you pick two, you need to make sure that they're theories that actually do work together. Like for instance, if you say person-centered and Gestalt, there's a lot about person-centered and Gestalt that do not work together. So if you pick two, you have to know them well enough to know how they actually fit together, because I will call you on it if they don't fit together. This is a serious issue. There are some people who want to kind of dismiss theories as not mattering. We can't do that. Theories matter. They're a huge driver in treatment. They're a huge driver in the treatment planner. And the more we know a theory, the more that gives us a map. The less we know about theories, the more we're kind of just doing whatever feels right to us. It's just I just think that this is what this person needs right now. If that's what we wanted to do, we could be the bartender. We could be the person sitting to them, talking to them in the coffee shop. But we're their professional. We're their mental health professional, which means we need to really know the theory, or two theories maybe, that we ascribe to, and we need to know what they say about an individual, how that individual is fixed, how that individual gets broken, what the basic needs of that individual are, etc., etc., etc. This will be the map. Also, it'll help us give them information that they can then use in their own life. Because again, we're giving them the map of how to interpret things, kind of how to work through things, right? Rather than just being like, oh yeah, I'm just going to tell you whatever comes to mind. So if you are eclectic, stop being eclectic. That just means you're picking whatever you want and just sticking it together. So I'm against eclectic. I don't want to hear eclectic. No eclectic. One or two, right? And if you really feel like you know so much and there's not a single theory that you think is close enough to being right, that you just can't pick one, so you need to be eclectic, what you need to do instead is from the ground up build your own. But you're not qualified to do that until you've been in the field for at least 10 years. So for now, pick one. Pick one, or maybe pick two if you know that they go together. I know it sounds like I'm being mean about this. It's not my intention. My intention is to be really clear about it, though, because I see this as a point of huge ethical import, and I see a lot of people falling down on it. And what they do, how they cover themselves by not studying a theory and really knowing it, is they just say, oh, I'm eclectic, which they use to cover, I don't really know a theory, I haven't really done a lot of research into this, I don't really know how you would apply this, so I'm just going to do whatever feels right and call it eclectic. Oh yeah, that kind of seems Gestaltian. Oh yeah, that kind of seems Rogerian. Oh, that kind of seems RET. Oh yeah. No. Pick one or pick two. Okay. So that's my 2 cents. We've got just a little bit more to cover, and then we're done. Okay. So something I want you guys to think about too, as we're in psychopathology, is how do we define psychopathology, right? Is it whatever's maladaptive in society? Right? That could maybe not, right? Some things about like being in Germany in World War II were not maladaptive when people were like fighting against Hitler, but would we want to call that psychopathology? They were rebelling against Hitler? Whatever is not approved of in society, well, there's a lot right now that's not approved of in society. I mean, you can't stand up for a traditional marriage, right? And without being called some form of insult. So is that psychopathology? Whatever is maladaptive for individual goals, well, you just gave your cousin the last $50 you had, so now you can't buy food tomorrow, but your cousin can make rent. Well, that's maladaptive for your own individual goals, but is that psychopathology? Right? But think about these things. Like, how do we define psychopathology? How do we as a society define psychopathology? And then also I want you to consider, how do you as an individual, if I was to come to you and say, how do you define psychopathology? What would you say? Hope you guys have a great day. Again, email me with any questions.